Welcome to the New Moon Knitting channel. My name's Hillary, and today I am going to be talking about a new project that I am starting that is a little different from what I normally work on. I am going to a Renaissance fair this fall. I'll be attending the Maryland Renaissance Festival, which is about an hour from where I live. And I assume most people are familiar with a Renaissance fair, even if you haven't been to one. If you're American, at least, like, it shows up enough in our pop culture and media that, like, you probably have, like, a sense of what goes on there. But if you've never heard of one, if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically there are these, like, large outdoor festivals that have kind of like a Renaissance or like Elizabethan theme to them. So they tend to have a lot of food. They have vendors selling a lot of handmade goods like, woodworking, metalworking, pottery, things like that. They have lots of live shows from like comedy acts to like juggling, sword fighting. They have a big jousting tournament. I think they sometimes have, I think I once saw a show that was like birds of prey. So they had like falcons and things like that. They have games, you can do like axe throwing, just like a really big outdoor event that is, maybe a little kitschy, but just like so much fun. And one of the big highlights for me is like a lot of people come in costume. So you see people in all sorts of costumes. Some of them are like, from my, outsider non-historian opinion, they seem to be like very accurate. They've got lots of layers and there's lots of details. But, there's also like a lot of like fantasy costumes. You see people dressed up as fairies and dragons and all kinds of like niche kind of things. And so I've always loved that, but I've never worn a costume to the Renaissance Fair. And the last couple years I've gone, I've thought about different things I could make. I thought, well, maybe I could do like, like a kind of like a hood, like a capelet kind of thing. Like, what could I put together? And I don't want to knit something just to wear to the Renaissance Fair. You know what I mean? Like, knitting is something that takes a lot of time. Time is a valuable resource for me. I go to this fair for like 5 hours one day a year. And that just doesn't make sense for me in terms of like the cost per wear, the amount of time, all of that. So I was trying to think of something I could make that was like Renaissance inspired or like felt like it had like an essence of what this fair is about, but like is also like something I could wear every day. So I started kind of researching, Googling. I'm again, like very kind of surface level kind of looking. I found some examples of like, beautiful knits that they did in Elizabethan England, but they just didn't seem very practical for my lifestyle. So I was expanding my search. I was thinking like fantasy knits. I thought about knitting Pippin's scarf from Lord of the Rings. But then I was also, I was looking up like medieval knitting, and I kept coming back to this picture here. So this is actually like a composite of several different photos, but essentially they are all examples of very, very early knitwear. So some of the earliest examples we have of knitting, and I believe all of these come from socks that were found in Egypt sometime between the like 11th and 15th centuries. So a pretty wide range, but this is what they look like. And I just kept coming back to them because I think the color work really speaks to me. There's something so timeless about it. Like, you could definitely see this on somebody's pattern nowadays and it wouldn't seem out of place. And I think also just like the connection to the fact that these are like the oldest knit items we still have available to us in the modern age, the oldest ones that have survived, making that connection between past and present also felt like something kind of cool. And so I couldn't get them off my brain. And I was like, okay, let's see what I can do with these patterns. So my first thought was, let me remake these socks. What would happen if I tried to remake these socks? And I found a really good resource. I think it's on Ravelry, but I'll link straight to the pattern page. It was called Dar Urtatim, Medieval Knitting, Egyptian Knitting 2, my recreation of a medieval Egyptian sock in the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C. And the creator of this does a great job of walking through the steps that they took in order to recreate to the best of their abilities, though the sock, one like what's often considered like the oldest sock. And they talk about the yarn, and they have like a fairly loose pattern. So I thought I was going to make these socks, and then I thought, are socks the best way to show off like knitting at a Renaissance fair? You know, I'm going to be wearing shoes the whole time. I'm not taking my shoes off. I'm probably going to wear hiking boots or some kind of outdoor boots because it can be muddy. I don't want my socks to get muddy, and they're going to be wiped down by the ground. If it's wet for any reason, I would hate for that to happen. And also, like, they're not an outfit. I still have to figure out what I'm going to wear on the rest of myself that makes sense with these socks that maybe you can see like this much of. And so I didn't think it was like in the spirit of what I was trying to do. But I thought, well, maybe I can use some of these patterns, because the color work patterns is what really drew me to these in the first place. And so I kept looking to see, like, can I reverse engineer some of these? And then I found another amazing resource, which I will also link below. This is a paper called Walk Like an Egyptian, an exploration of medieval Egyptian stockings. So this paper has basically two main sections. The writer talks a lot about kind of like the history of these socks, and then walks through their own personal experience trying to recreate a pair of these socks. Now, their interpretation was a little bit different than the Dar Urtatim one, where instead of trying to just recreate a sock exactly as it exists, they wanted to take features of some of these early color works and combine them into one sock, but try to, you know, use the same techniques in terms of the toe construction and the heel construction, and, you know, pay homage to how all of these things work together. It's great. It was fun to kind of like read through real quick, but what sold me on this was this person generously charted out like 10 to 15 different charts from these early knitting examples. And I was like, okay, so if I don't have to reverse engineer these charts and I can just work off of these color work charts, that gives me the freedom to try to do a lot of things kind of based on the time I have left. Because also, like, I only have a month to try to knit this, whatever I'm going to make. And so if I spend half that time doing the charts, that limits how much knitting time I have. So I knew I had charts so I could focus on what I wanted to knit. And I decided I wanted to knit a sweater. I mentioned in my fall knitting plans video that I was thinking about making the Fjädergenser by Rauma Designs. And there's a couple of things I really liked about the construction of that color work. It has big, broad raglan kind of stitches that are in the main color and separate out those color works, which feels very modern. It's got like a funnel neck. It's got really nice kind of like big shaping. And so I was like, maybe I can take some inspiration from that and make myself a sweater. So that's what I decided to do. And I went ahead and I purchased some yarn. I decided DK weight probably was the best weight to go with because it is thin enough that it will really show off this color work without looking too chunky, but it's also thick enough that like I'll be able to like feasibly get a sweater out in a month, maybe, hopefully. And so I didn't have anything in my stash that was kind of the right colors, but I did have a coupon to Webs, which is a online and in-person yarn store here in the United States. And so I had one for my birthday, and so I was like, okay, let me see what Webs has. So I ended up picking this yarn. This is Barocco Ultra Alpaca, and I picked it because it was DK, because it was on the website, and because they had the colors I was looking for. So these original socks were knit like with like indigo dyed yarn and like a plain colored yarn, and this came in a really pretty indigo heather and this like off-white color. And so I thought that would be really good. I know alpaca is maybe not always the best for color work because it's can be like a little too drapey, but I thought the wool alpaca blend would give it enough structure to continue to kind of show off the color work. And so yeah, I ordered that. All right, so I kind of sketched out what I'm thinking. Not a great sketch, but that's okay. You get the idea. So I'm thinking like a little bit of a funnel neck, and then I want to do alternating bands of the different color work. I'll probably use the same kind of thin band of color work for continued throughout the body, but then I want to do like some of the bigger motifs in between, with obviously the off-white as the main color and the indigo as the contrast color for the color work. Yeah, I I think it's gonna be a fun experiment. I don't really self-draft sweaters that often, and I certainly like have never done anything like this where I've had to kind of account for different kinds of color work. I know that the Knitting Fools sweater pattern generator does not have short rows, so I'm gonna have to play around with getting those short rows right and adding those in. And obviously my main nemesis here is time. I have like it'll be tight. I don't really have anything else that I'm working on right now. I think I've wrapped up most of my other projects. But so I can focus on it, but yeah, come along to see if I finish this in time for the Renaissance Fair. All right, so it's been about a week and I have a couple of updates. The first is I have my swatch. So I put together this little swatch. I used a couple of the smaller motifs just to get a sense of what the yarns would look like together and how they'd block. The first good news was this did not bleed at all. I was a little concerned about this really dark indigo and this white color, and there was not like even a whisper of blue in the water. Now these are like commercially dyed yarns, which I think tend to be a little more color fast, but I still was worried about it. So I'm very happy about that. Makes me feel more confident about my eventual blocking of the whole sweater. The other thing, I think it blocked really nicely. I think the tension on the color work is nice. I knit it, I have all these little ends because I tried to knit my swatch in the round, which is not something I've done too much. But I think I got good tension through it, and yeah, I think this is gonna look really nice in a sweater. The real important thing, obviously, to get out of the swatch was my gauge. So once I knit this, I'm trying to remember what my gauge was. I want to say it was like 23 stitches and 29 rows over 4 inches. It's written down somewhere, but I used those numbers and I used the Knitting Fools sweater pattern generator. So I filmed a little bit of what that looks like, kind of walking through kind of high level. What you do is you go to the website. I'll include the website below. You just put in your gauge. You can choose like a drop shoulder, I think, or maybe like drop shoulder, a set in sleeve, or a raglan. I chose the raglan. I chose my my gauge, and then I selected what level of ease I wanted. Now you can't select inches, but I think I selected roomy. I think it's like fit, comfortable, and roomy. I picked whatever the biggest one was because I knew I wanted some positive ease on this. And it gives you like a real basic sweater kind of formula. So there's no short rows. It's just cast on this, do your raglan increases, and then, join, or, put your sleeves on hold, do the body. It's just 2x2 rib for the collar and the cuffs. It's very simple, but it gave me a starting off point to kind of figure out how I wanted this to fit and kind of what I needed my stitch counts to kind of look like in order to have like a neck that fits pretty well, and then like, a body that fits pretty well. So I did that. And then I did like 2.5 hours of math to try to get this to work the way I wanted to, because there are several different motifs I want to use on this pattern. And I recognize, like, as you're building out the raglan, obviously your stitch counts are changing constantly. So I was like, it doesn't matter if they don't equal out at all in the kind of top part of the raglan. But when I get to the body, I want to make sure that I have a repeat that works for the 2 main motifs I want to work on the body, which is actually like this little zigzag one and then like a bigger motif. And, this I think was like a 10 stitch repeat, and the other one I think is an 18 stitch repeat. And so I was trying to figure out, like something they were both divisible by, and also that would give me a number of inches around that would give me the positive ease I want on this sweater. And I went back and forth, and it took me so long. I think I've mentioned before, like, math is just not my strong suit. I have to write everything down, pen and paper, and it just took me a really long time to get to like numbers that I liked, numbers that made sense for everything. I actually ended up referencing another DK weight raglan sweater I've made before, which is the Zipper Sweater Light by Petite Knit. I just had that pattern, and so I was like, okay, based on what they say their gauge is and how many stitches they start at the top and how many stitches they start at the underarm for the raglan and how many stitches they have for the body, how can I modify that to get pretty close with my gauge, and then make sure that my numbers work out so that I have pretty clean pattern repeats. And I think I finally got to the right thing. We'll see when I actually get to the body if I made any mistakes, but so far I think I'm on the right path. So I made sure I wrote everything down that I had kind of mathed out, and then I got started. So let me show you how much progress I have made this week. All right, so it's not a ton to look at just yet, but I have made a little bit of progress on the raglan, and I don't think this is the right, I don't really know. This is a sleeve. Here we go. So like that's a sleeve, kind of like that. That actually looks really nice. Seeing it on camera, I'm like, okay, I think this might work out, because like seeing it like this when you're knitting it, I'm like, I don't know, I'm worried about it, but I do think looking at it like this, if I can do this, I think it's gonna look nice. So I decided to just start with the body. Again, like the Knitting Fool, it's just, you start at the top of the neck, you knit the collar, you knit the collar, and then you knit the body. I just started with the body because I thought I want to have some flexibility to go back and like figure out the neck, because I'm not sure. I do think the way this is sitting, obviously, like it's not tight. I don't think it's going to be tight against my neck. And that's kind of what I wanted. I want like a funnel neck. So I have to make sure that I knit it long enough and tight enough on a tight enough needle, few enough stitches that like it fits really nicely. I fit it over my head and it's not uncomfortable, but like it gives you that nice sort of like funnel necky kind of like eases in from the body into like a mock turtleneck. So I actually think like before I get too much farther on the raglan shaping, I may go back and just do that so that I have a sense of like what it's going to look like, so that I know when I get to the underarm that it's long enough with however much the neck is going to pull up the stitches, because it's going to be like a little bit tighter. So this is knit on a US 5, which is a 3.75 millimeter needle, and I think I'll probably knit the collar on a US 2. I know a US 3 is a 3.25. I know a lot of like DK weight European knits call for a 3 millimeter, which is a US 2.5, which is not a needle I have. So I think I'll probably just do a US 2.75, which I think it's a 2.75, which is a US 2, just to get it real nice and nice and neat and even. Yeah, so I finished the first motif and like most of the white in between before the next motif. I have one more bigger motif to do in the yoke, and then I'll split for sleeves, and then I'll move on. I am traveling next week. I'm going to Vermont, so I will have a lot of time in the car and kind of like on this quiet vacation to knit. So I'm hoping to make a ton of progress, because then when I get back, I just have 1 week until the Renaissance Fair. So fingers crossed I get it all done. But yeah, like I said, seeing it, even if it's like little state here, I'm starting to see the vision, and I'm like, okay, this might actually work out and actually be really cute. So, all right. All right, so greetings from Vermont. I have been here almost about a week now, a little less than a week, staying in a little cabin with my husband, and so far the trip has been really great. We went to the Vermont Sheep and Wool Festival. We've been doing a lot of fun stuff outside, hiking, and just really taking in the beauty that is Vermont in the fall. And I just wanted to give a quick little update on my project. So I did make quite a bit of progress this week. It's a little bunched up, and I'm holding my mic today because I don't have the attachment for my camera. But let me put this down I'm going to put this down for a second so I can show it to you, and then I'll explain it. So yeah, it's bunched up a little bit because I am about to split for sleeves, but I am about to split for sleeves. So I finished all of the raglan shaping on the yoke, and I'm through my second pattern repeat. All I need to do now is do that split, and then I can start working on the body. So far, I'm still really happy with how this is turning out. I think these patterns are so cool. And I have done a little bit of reflecting now that I've worked through that second pattern, kind of on just like the real skill that went into creating these pieces, almost a 1,000 years ago. While I was here, I also reread this, which is the Walk Like an Egyptian paper, all about recreating a pair of socks inspired by these early Egyptian knits that I've been using the charts for to create my sweater. So I had skimmed it initially. I saw the charts. I was like, oh, perfect. I'm going to use this. And then I didn't give it like a thorough read. And so this week I did. And I just wanted to like talk about it a little bit more because it's a really interesting paper. And there was some really kind of like interesting things in here that I wanted to point out. So the first is, so usually the dates on these early knits are put somewhere between the 1200s and the 1500s AD. I guess the reason we don't have a more clear-cut date on them is they come into the timeline for us via like private collection. So they weren't found by archaeologists at archaeological sites. Most of the time they are something that came from a private collection. And so we don't have kind of like the strata of where they were discovered. We don't have any other items to compare them in terms of that we do know the age of. And so that's why there's some ambiguity around the dates for some of these. Another interesting thing about the construction of the socks is they're really like, they don't have any kind of ribbing to keep them up. So the original designs, the author of this paper and other professionals speculate that they use some kind of a string or band to hold them up above the calf, which is obviously very different from how we make socks now. And when you look at kind of the intricacies of the color work, you're like, well, ribbing feels easier, but there's no purl stitching. So I thought that was kind of cool. Just like an interesting thing that, something we take for granted when we make socks is not present in these very early artifacts. The author talks about the short row heel shaping on some of the socks. And so when we think of short row heels, we often think you do decreases and then you do a set of increases to create that classic toe shape. But I guess on some of these very early designs, they just do the decreasing of the short row shaping. And I'll post some pictures here so you can kind of see what that looks like. So it's a different kind of foot construction than what we're used to. But looking at the finished garment or object that the author of this paper created, it does seem to create like a fairly decent shape to fit a foot. So just all the creative ways human beings have used knitting to, make stuff that fits their feet, and the different ways we can solve for the same kind of problems is interesting. Another thing that I took more time to appreciate this time when I was looking through it is there's a picture in here, and my printer's not great, so I'll pop in like a digital picture of it. And it's just this kind of simple knitted tube, but historians suggest it might have been an infant sock. And I think, I have a lot of friends right now who are expecting. And so I've been doing a lot of like baby knitting and knitting for infants. And I think like there's something that's like, that really can connect us to like the history of knitting when, at least for me, when I think about knitting for a baby, because I think when more than kind of any other gift knit, you're knitting so much like hope into it and like love. Often it's something that only fits for a little bit of time, but like you want this new person to have something really special. And so just seeing that, I mean, they don't even really know if it was an infant sock, it's just a tube, but just seeing that, like, and thinking about that connection that knitting brings us and kind of has always brought us, and thinking about, was it, some little child's mom or auntie or just somebody in the community maybe that cared about that baby, making something special for them. Again, it's probably projecting. It's probably my little hormonal pregnancy brain, but I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I would 100% recommend reading through this because the author does a really good job of explaining, you know, how they did their best to kind of recreate the original socks and where they varied and the decisions they made and things like that. So I think it's really cool and I enjoyed reading it. So I'm going to get back to the rest of my vacation and I will have an update when I return. Okay, so real quick update. It's been about a week since I showed this off and I have made a ton of progress, which is the good news. I think last time I showed this to you, I had just finished the raglan shaping up at the top there. And so since then, I have managed to complete all of the body, including the ribbing at the bottom. I just ended up doing 1x1 ribbing like I did on the collar. However, I did it in the same size as the body because I didn't want it to pull in too much. So yeah, I think I did about 1.5 inches of ribbing at the bottom after my last motif repeat. And then I picked up and knit a good portion of both sleeves. So did the same motifs, and then at the end here near the bottom, I actually just ended up doing kind of a modified shortened version of this pattern here. I cut out some of the repeats just to make it a little bit shorter for the sleeves. So yeah, the good news is I've made a ton of progress. The bad news is today is Friday, and the Renaissance Fair is on Sunday. So after I kind of got to the point where I had finished the color work on the sleeves, I decided it was more important to me to have a fairly blocked sweater than to have a sweater with full length sleeves. So I put the sleeve stitches on hold and I blocked it. And so I've pinned it and I'm letting it block. And I'm hoping that it's like fairly dry by tomorrow afternoon so that I can just go ahead and pick up some stitches for the sleeves and do like just kind of a shortened ribbing to give it kind of like a 3/4 sleeve look for now. I probably will also put a lifeline in both of the sleeves so that what I can do is when the time comes, if I want to make the sleeves longer, I can just pick them up from that lifeline and wear it again. But yeah, the end is in sight, even if it's not quite what I think I imagined it would be. It's pretty close. And so yeah, I'm really hoping I can pull off a little bit of a miracle in the next 48 hours. It'll be tricky. Work this week was very busy. My dad is coming into town in like 20 minutes. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But even if I don't have it by Sunday, I will have a really pretty sweater. All right, I am back with my last update and with my finished object. So here is how it ended up turning out. I will include a little bit of B-roll as well and some photos so you can see what it looks like as I continue to talk about it. But she is done. I gave a very quick update where I mentioned I had finished both the sleeves to the end of the color work, and then I put the stitches on hold and I blocked the whole thing. Like 3 days before the Renaissance Fair. And I'm really happy I did that because I think with the color work and with this like alpaca wool blend yarn, it just allowed everything to like open up and breathe. And after I did the blocking, like any kind of tension issues pretty much resolved themselves. You can kind of see here on the sleeve kind of end cap that like this circular knitting in color work is pulling in a little bit more than this is on the end, but overall I'm really happy with how it blocked, and doing it like 3 days ahead of time gave it enough time to dry so that all I had to do, the only part that hasn't been blocked are these little cuffs at the end. So once it was dry enough to work on again, I went ahead and picked up my stitches and I just did, I think like 15 rounds of white, and then I capped it off with some 1x1 ribbing, and I just did the ribbing in the same needle size as the rest of the body to create these kind of loose drapey sleeves. because I didn't have a ton of time, right? These are not full length sleeves. These are like 3/4 length sleeves. And so I thought having that nice open-ended, loose kind of feeling at the ends of them would just be a much more kind of comfortable wear and would make sense like aesthetically with the sweater more than doing kind of like any kind of like quick decreasing or any kind of like tightness, to have kind of like any sort of ballooning on this part of my arm didn't feel like the most comfortable or the most flattering kind of shape to have. So I just kept them nice and open. I did end up wearing this to the Renaissance Fair. Here is a photo. It did end up being hot every day this fall. When I plan on wearing a homemade knit, it ends up being a super hot day. But we went kind of when they open in the morning, and so at least kind of like through noon, midday, it was fairly comfortable to wear this. And the fact that, you know, it's not full length sleeves probably helped with that, because there was a lot more airflow in there. But it wasn't, it was just like a little too warm. It wasn't like uncomfortable where I knew I was going to be like sweaty and itchy and stuff. So I toughed it out and I wore this while we were there. So I am going to call this a finished object for now. I don't know what I want to do with the sleeves yet. I kind of want to hold on to it for a little bit more time, wear it a couple of times as the temperatures continue to cool down. Like, does a 3/4 length sleeve sweater make sense in my wardrobe at a DK weight, in just basically based on the climate I live in? Or are there days like where it's too warm to be wearing alpaca, or days that are too cold to be wearing 3/4 length sleeves? So I'm going to wear this through the rest of October, November, December, like early next year. And then once we're through the sweater wearing months, I'm going to see how much I actually picked it up, how much I wore it, how I was able to layer it to make it make sense when it's just kind of cool and when it's cold. And then I'll figure out if I want to finish making these sleeves a little longer. I do only have about 25 grams of this like cream color left, so making sure I have enough will be a little tricky. Overall, I am really happy that I made this, and I'm really happy with this project. I think the color work is stunning. I think it is so beautiful. It's not really something I would normally do, and so giving myself this challenge allowed me to play with like some more traditional designs than I would normally be like gravitate to. I also don't tend to work in blues at all, and I think this like deep indigo with this parchment color is a really pretty color combination, and I actually really like how it turned out. I'm really proud of how I kind of combined these like very old designs with these sort of like modern shaping and construction elements, with the raglan, with these kind of like big raglan, wide raglan kind of like seams, and with these kind of like 3/4 length sleeves. Yeah, overall, like, it was a challenge. It was definitely slow going at the beginning because I had to do a lot of math, and it was, you know, kind of complicated. I don't really self-draft a lot of sweaters, and like this was my first time self-drafting, and so keeping in mind, you know, how am I going to make all of these different charts work in a sweater was definitely a challenge, especially for someone who like is not a natural at mathematics and had to do the math like 5 times just to make sure I was right. And even then, spoiler, I was wrong. So it turns out like I did all my raglan shaping, and I thought I had done the math correctly so that when I started on these color works in the body, that I would have the right number of stitches. I was 5 stitches off. I think I miscounted how many stitches I was going to have on the underarms. So I worked in like an additional 5 stitches on the body. So, you know, if I could go back, I just would make the raglan a little bit. I would just go a couple more rounds on the raglan to make sure that works out correctly. But I don't think in the finished project it affects the shaping too much, or I guess like the way it looks on the fit of it, because it's already kind of oversized. And because like I'm pregnant, like it's nice to have all the extra room that I can. We'll see like afterwards again, like as I wear it, if that's going to be an issue. Maybe I'll return to this someday and give you an update on it. But yeah, it was really fun to learn about these patterns and to learn a little bit more about this history of this craft I love so much. And yeah, I think I will try more kind of projects like this because it was really fun to work on. So that is it for this sweater for now. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more of what I'm knitting in the future, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe. That is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.